A Europe-wide database to track all passengers flying in and out of the EU. It's one of the latest counter-terrorism measures being pushed by European leaders. A necessary evil to keep us safe, or another step on the road to a surveillance society? Welcome to On the Front Line. First France and Belgium, then Denmark. 3 major terrorist incidents in Europe in the space of a few weeks. All the countries were targeted by homegrown extremists. The murder of journalists and shoppers in Paris in particular focused politicians' minds on reinforcing security for Europe's citizens. Previously blocked in the European Parliament, plans for countries to share airline passenger information recently won MEPs' provisional support. Such a pan-European system would see the blanket collection of data from all air travellers flying in and out of the EU, along with flight and passport details, a passenger's eating preferences, credit card and mobile phone number and email would also be shared. Controversial, the data could be kept for up to 5 years and used by police and security services. Civil liberties campaigners argue it's a big brother measure which severely undermines privacy, while supporters of the passenger name record claim it could prove a vital tool in tackling would-be terrorists returning from the battlefields of Iraq and Syria. Cracking down on extremist websites and better intelligence sharing are also seen as key areas for improvement. Europe's prized Schengen system is also under scrutiny, with some countries, notably France and Spain, calling for reform through the reintroduction of internal border checks. But getting agreement on such counter-terrorism measures could prove tricky, especially if legislators in Brussels deem the basic freedoms and privacy of Europe's citizens are at risk. OK, joining me now to discuss this issue further is Timothy Kirkhope, the MEP leading the debate on the passenger name record, and Joe McNamee from the civil rights group European Digital Rights. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on the front line. I'd like to start with you, Timothy Kirkhope. We've just seen some of the information that would be stored on this database. How will this prevent terrorist attacks and help police?
Well, first of all, passenger name records. There have been records of passengers travelling for many years, of course, through advanced passenger information that all airlines require and have required for a long time.
But this is different. This would collect everything.
This is a wider set of questions, 19 in all. It is not an invasion of individual liberty to the extent that some people are suggesting, but it is a very important tool, properly regulated and controlled, in which we will be able to have enough information to establish patterns of activity of people who mean to do us harm.
OK, patterns. What use is the pattern of finding somebody's eating preferences, for example? What do you find out from whether somebody eats chicken or fish?
You say on your item eating habits and so on. We're not obliging anybody to give us information on eating. It's not actually a specific issue on the 19 questions, actually. But the truth is, of course...
But it's blatant profiling, isn't it?
No, it's not. That's exactly what we're avoiding, is profiling here. The reason for doing a European-wide operation is because if we don't do it and have common standards and common protections in relation to data, individual countries will more and more introduce their own systems, as the British already have, and these systems will have no protections of data, and what's more, these systems will all be slightly different and failing to achieve what we need, which is to have standard situations where we can work out where people have intentions or are going to travel in such a way that it might harm us.
OK, thank you. A common sense measure to unify the data to protect us all?
Well, the first question is it profiling or not? And profiling is gathering as much data as you can, working out patterns in order to identify people that fall into a particular pattern. That is profiling. To say it's not profiling, it's looking for patterns, is an obvious contradiction. There's no evidence to show that it is a necessary proportionate measure.
No, I think that's completely wrong, of course, because we've talked with the intelligence agencies and the police authorities, and we're looking at the minimum in terms of retention of data and so on, that is going to be helpful to them in the job they have to do. So there are a lot of safeguards. Profiling, definitely, that is not. Profiling is where the alternative to what we're proposing would be airlines picking on individual routes and saying, those routes we will watch everybody carefully. If that's not profiling, I don't know what it is. What we're doing is not profiling.
Okay. Isn't the real danger here the fact it's a slippery slope, that what little privacy we have left is slowly being eroded? And what are you going to ask for next? Email passwords?
No, I mean, I think the thing about this is that we believe that this is the minimum amount of information which would be very useful in helping us with the present dangers we have, not just terrorism. If we do not do what I'm proposing here, then we will end up with many systems with no safeguards or no guaranteed safeguards for people. What is better? And what about freedom? Freedom is important, but security is also very important, so you can enjoy your freedoms. Without the security we're offering, the citizens of Europe will lose freedoms.
Are you confused, Joe McNamee, about who the bad guys are here?
No, absolutely not. It's absolutely essential to find measures that are effective, that work, and defend our rule of law and our democratic principles. We need to be careful. We need to be targeted. We need to invest in measures that actually work. And
yeah, it's not really clear how effective this system would have been in stopping the terrorist attacks. The Kouachi brothers, who carried out the attacks in Paris, were known by the security services. Yeah. The killers of Lee Rigby were known by the security services. It's a case of the intelligence agencies dropping the ball, isn't it? They should have used the data that they had in a better way rather than demanding more tools, which is what they always demand.
Our intelligence agencies have a very difficult job to do because we live where, and we acknowledge the fact that human rights are very important. But I think it's the business about Lee Rigby or these specific cases. I am not trying to push this to try and show that this would have stopped any of those things. I can't guarantee it. What I do know, and what I have good reason to believe anyway, is that there are a number of other terrorist attacks, there are a number of areas of criminality which, with PNR, we can deal with. OK. Why do you distrust the authorities so much, Joe McNamee, here, not to use this data correctly?
Well, we've got lots of evidence of data being abused by governments, and the Snowden revelations gave us a lot of insight into the abuses in the UK. In fact, only in December, the UK's own surveillance court found that the UK had been behaving illegally. But we need proper safeguards.
But that's the whole point in my proposals, why we are putting in my proposals themselves a whole lot of safeguards. I've gone a real long way as a rapporteur to get this right and balanced, you know?
No doubt. But, I mean, for example, we saw the telephone of the German Chancellor hacked and world leaders hacked without the knowledge of the US President. It was done by the American security services. If that's happening, how can we trust them?
Well, I think there's an awful lot here of suppositions still, in my view. I don't think I want to rely on the testimony of Mr. Snowden, really. I'd rather rely on our intelligence agencies and security services generally to be able to actually protect us. We must give them enough tools to be able to do that, and accountability as well. I don't deny it, but that's where we need to go here.
We live in a dangerous world, don't we?
Well, I'm wondering whether you'd rely on the court, the British court, that ruled that the UK was accessing US gathered data illegally.
Well, I'm a lawyer, but I don't always rely on courts. I listen to them, and certainly the Court of Justice that talked about the issue of proportionality and necessity, not relating to my proposals, but general issues regarding data. I agree with that, and that is why my proposals are both proportional and, in my view, very necessary.
We often hear about the debate between the balance between security and privacy. But, for example, our credit card details are noted, internet behaviour is monitored. Do we have a private life anymore?
Yes, we do, or we will have if we can reform our data protection regime and have proper rules and proper sanctions for abusing the rules. The issue in the world of so-called big data is not individual pieces of data being collected like they always were. It's merging of databases and comparing of databases, and the information that you can add from, for example, PNR data with other databases of the government in order to develop types of profiling that we can't even imagine.
So a pooling, in fact, of data, which is your worst nightmare, isn't it?
I've got plenty of nightmares, but it is a worry because we're producing more and more and more data, and it's very difficult to assess today what merging PNR database with other databases would mean, what it will mean next year, what it will mean in 10 years' time.
OK. But do we have a private life anymore?
Well, I differentiate between the commercial use of data, the selling of data about me, which I have volunteered to give to all kinds of companies. We all do that almost every day, and no one thinks about it. I think there needs to be some real concern about that. But my worst nightmare, we're getting into nightmares. My worst nightmare is that I have failed as a legislator to do sufficient to protect the citizens I represent. That's a nightmare to me. More of the terrorist offences, more major criminality, more children being abducted and abused. That's something I don't want to be responsible for.
So I can't help thinking that it would have been good if you didn't table amendments in the data protection regulation to make it easier to profile people rather than more difficult.
I don't want to profile people.
Your amendments on profiling helped achieve that.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Fascinating debate. That's it for this edition of On the Front Line. You can find us on social media as well as euronews.com. Until the next time, thanks for watching.